What's up guys, ATCG here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we're profiling Blackluster Soldier, one of the most fun favorite decks as of one of Yu-Gi's ace monsters becoming an archetype. Unfortunately, this deck was not very viable ever because it did have the tools to OTK, but it wasn't very consistent. However, with Toon Chaos giving us chaos support for pretty much any light and dark based deck, specifically this one which takes advantage of light and dark monsters getting banished from the grave, this deck has some new breath on it, and I think it's a bit more consistent than it used to be, and it can actually have some plays going first as well with a few cards that I have incorporated in the deck. So it's a decent rogue strategy right now that you can use. I'm not expected to do super well with this deck, but it's something that if you're a fan of, then you can finally play it and have some success with it. So before we begin, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So to start off, we have 3 Blackluster Soldier Super Soldier, the boss monster of the deck. People have started cutting this to maybe 2, along with a ritual spell, but I still think it's still very necessary to max it out because you need to see at least one of these to search the second one, so you can OTK. This monster has a few effects on its own, but it usually hits the field with more effects. If summoned completely on its own, then when it destroys a monster by battle, it's basically a Flame Wingman. It deals damage equal to the attack of the monster destroyed, and if this monster is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon a Gaia the Fierce Knight from your hand, deck, or grave, which I am playing one copy of the Charging Gaia so you can summon this, because when there's an effect in a deck that I can kind of take advantage of, but the card that summons isn't very consistent, I will still play one copy just to make maximum value of the effect, because I still think this is the optimal way to play, especially weaker decks, because you need to take as much advantage as possible of the cards. Next up, we have 3 Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning, another card you have to max out because, like I said, the deck takes advantage of you banishing light and dark monsters from the graveyard. We'll go to that to the next 2 monsters, and BLS being at 3 right now is something that the deck never really had back in the day because BLS was still at 1, now it's at 3, so the deck can OTK very easily with 3 copies of BLS. This and the ritual monster are also searchable thanks to Toon Chaos, so you can very easily put out a lot of damage on the board with monsters that can attack multiple times. Next up, we have the 2 Knights. We have 3 copies of Beginning Knight. The first one is the one that when used to ritual summon your Blackluster Soldier, it helps you banish one monster your opponent controls once per turn, and if it destroys a monster by battle, it has the original BLS effect, can attack once again in a row, and if this card is banished from the graveyard, you can add a ritual spell from your deck to your hand. And then we have 3 copies of Evening Twilight Knight. This has the same first effect. If used to ritual summon a BLS, then you can banish a monster your opponent controls, and once per turn you can also banish one random card from your opponent's hand face down until your opponent's next end phase, so they will not have that card for their following turn. And if it's banished from the grave, you can add a ritual monster from your deck to your hand. So you need to max out these 2, you need to see at least one of them. I also play Reinforcement so I can have 7 copies, because the ritual spell helps you use one of them from your hand or field and then the other one from the deck, so you need to see one of these 2. And when you summon your Super Soldier using both these monsters, you basically have a Super Soldier that can banish 2 monsters your opponent controls, banish a random card from your opponent's hand, attack twice, and Flame Wingman your opponent every time it destroys a monster. So a monster with basically 4 or 5 effects that can very easily clear a board and OTK in helping with another copy of BLS. So these 2 also help you search your cards, so when they're in the grave, you can banish them for either your BLS, and I play a couple more monsters you can use to banish from the grave to search your ritual monsters and your ritual spells, so you can make the deck more consistent this way. Next up, we have 1 copy of Charging Gaia the Fierce Knight. Like I said, I'm playing 1 copy of this just to make sure that BLS Super Soldier gets its maximum value. This is not a bad card. If you draw it, you can normal summon it without tributing. It will just lower its attack to 1900, but still it's a decent card. The effect of when it's tributed, I do not really incorporate anything to use that effect, but if you want, you can incorporate some stuff like a Monster Gate to maybe use the second effect as well. I do play 1 copy of Wyver Buster and 1 copy of Collapse Serpent. I really like these cards because of Toon Chaos, because Chaos Space is a really good card for a deck like this, because not only can it search your Blackluster Soldier monsters, because yes, your Super Soldier cannot be normal summoned because it's a ritual monster, so you can search that as well, but having these 2 in the deck help you push for a game when you're going second because they're decent bodies, and when you're going first, they help you make Heavenly Spheres, which is a disruption, so you can do something going first as well, which is something that the deck didn't really do before, and also these banish your Beginning Knight and your Evening Twilight Knight from the grave to give you more searching. Next up, we have Quan Chaos Creator, another monster that banishes your knights from the graveyard, and this one helps you special summon one of your monsters that are banished to, and then shuffle the rest into the deck when you have 3 of your banished monsters. Another big body, it's a level 8, so you can overlay with your BLS, which I do play a couple of rank 8s, because if you fail to OTK with your Blackluster Soldiers, then they don't really do anything, because the effects to banish monsters unfortunately are not quick effects, so you need to do something with those monsters to help you prevent from your opponent from coming back and OTKing by overlaying into negating monsters. I do play 3 Gale Dogra. I prefer this over Manju for 2 reasons. First of all, yes, it does give you 2 searches, but the second reason that it puts monsters in the grave, which Manju doesn't unless you tribute it. This one on its own, you can actually summon a BLS best just with this card, because you don't have to send to Herald of the Arclights if you know you cannot ritual summon, because maybe you haven't drawn any of your beginning nights or your evening twilight nights, but you do have a BLS. You can send an NTSS, pop a card, and then you can send maybe something like your Boreal Sword, which is a dark monster from the extra deck, and then you have a Light in the Dark in the grave to summon your BLS and try to clear your opponent's board this way, because you have popped a card with your NTSS, and then you have BLS on the field to try to clear the rest. So this is why I think this card is much better than Manju. Manju's only purpose over Gale Dogra is it's a level 4, so you can use it to ritual summon. Gale Dogra is level 2, so you cannot, but I still think Gale Dogra giving you 2 searches is actually very good, as well as filling your graveyard. For the hand traps, I play 3 copies of Asp Blossom and 3 copies of Effect Veiler. Again, you can switch this around if you want. You can play Nibiru in the main if you think you need it. You can play Gamma if you want, but I'm just playing the most generic ones to combat a random meta that you don't really know what you're gonna face. For the spell cards, we have 3 copies of Super Soldier Synthesis, the ritual spell. With this, you can ritual summon your BLS Super Soldier, and it helps you send your Evening Twilight Night or your Beginning Night from your deck to the grave. You only need, that's why I said you only need to see 1, because you need to send 1 light and 1 dark monster, 1 from your hand and 1 from your deck. So if you see 1 of those 7 cards, 3 Beginning Night, 3 Evening Twilight Night, and 1 Reinforcement, then the second one you can send from your deck to the grave, so your Super Soldier can come out on the field with all of the effects, so you can basically destroy your opponent's board and try to OTK. The support that we got from Toon Chaos, 3 copies of Chaos Space. This card is insane because it helps you search all your Black Luster Soldier monsters, it helps you search your creator, it searches your dragons, so you can go for the dragon plays. This card is really good, and it also puts back one of your banished monsters to the bottom of the deck to draw a card, so you can bypass the fact that the 2 little dragons are limited, so you can search them both again, even if you have to use summon the first one. So this card is really good, and I think you need to max out in this deck, because it gives the deck a lot more consistency. 3 copies of the field spell, Gateway to Chaos. When this card is activated, you add a Black Luster Soldier ritual monster or Rangani the Fierce Knight. You're never going to add the Charging Gaia, but you're going to add Super Soldier with this, and it also gets counters every time a monster is sent from the field to the grave, and by removing 3 spell counters, you can add a ritual spell from your deck to your hand. This effect, you can build your deck around this card a lot more, because this deck is not really meant to use the second effect of this card very often, but if you play something like a Venus maybe to do some link plays and then stack this card more easily, then you can get your ritual spell search as well, but I think it's a little bit over the top to try to use both of these effects. This is why Gale Dogra is here to search your ritual spells, and you can also search your ritual spells with your little knights, so you don't really have to go over the top, just commit to something like the Gateway to Chaos, and then if this card gets stopped, then you pretty much have nothing else. And for the generic spells, play 1 Rare Forming to search your Gateway to Chaos, 1 Reinforcement to search your Evening Twilight Night or your Beginning Night, and 1 Foolish Burial to send your Evening Twilight Night or your Beginning Night to the grave, because this fills your grave not only for your BLS, but also for your Chaos Dragons, so you can get a search and get a monster on the field. And I am playing 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, because I think if you're playing hand traps, the one that you have to be maining is Infinite Impermanence if you can afford it, because it doesn't trigger TTT. It's something that you can use if you draw it going second, because all the other hand traps, if you top deck them, then they're basically dead, unless your opponent activates something before you put a monster on the field, so you can use Gamma. And it's something that you will use pretty much against any deck. There's not a deck that does not get hurt by Infinite Impermanence, so this is why this is the only mandatory hand trap that I would not recommend not running if you plan to switch around the hand traps. And for the extra deck, we have 3 copies of Herald of the Arclight. I am playing 3 just because of Gale Dogra, because there will be some matchups where you can get some life points, and maybe you can send 3. It's not something that will happen too often, but just the fact that it's possible, then you can play 3 Heralds, so you can use them for your Gale Dogra. 2 Elder Entity NTSS. This one's the one that you will send if you already have the pieces you want in your hand, or if you need to break some cards in order to be able to play, because even if you search your cards and if your opponent has something that stops you from doing what you want, then you have to pop some cards. So this is why these cards are here. Basically, you need to send depending on what you need. So you can send 1/1, you can send 2 copies of 1, so you have to adapt to the field your opponent has, or if the opponent doesn't have anything, then you will send 2 Heralds, of course. For the rank 8s, I play 1 copy of 38 Hope Hambridger and 1 Photon Lord. These 2 are here, like I said, because if you don't OTK your opponent with your BLS and your Chaos Creator, then you need to do something with them to prevent your opponent from OTKing you next turn, because your monsters do not have any kind of interruption on their own, so you need to overlay them into these to make sure your opponent doesn't do anything too crazy. And for the Link monsters, I play 1 Almiraz. This is here to make sure that Gale Dogra does not stay on the field after you've paid 6,000 life points, because it's very easy for your opponent to one-shot you after you've paid so many life points and still having a monster with 600, 550 on the field. So if you summon Almiraz, then you can tribute it whenever you want to protect one of your BLS monsters if your opponent doesn't do anything, so there you don't have a weak monster on the field to your opponent to run over. 1 copy of Striker Dragon. I play this to make sure that I can use my monsters whenever I want. You can play LP or Pisti instead, but these will lock you into dragons, so if you need to summon something like a Phoenix instead of Heavenly Spheres when you use the Chaos Dragon combo and you go and you cycle them, if you play LP or Pisti, then these 2 will lock you. And it's not like you can use a Dragon Link combo in this deck. You have to commit harder if you want to do it, which is something you can actually do in this deck because you have a way to search your little Chaos Dragons. So if you want to play like a Divine Lance and Romulus with Fiber Link Cross, you can actually summon Herald, you can summon Savage Dragon, but I think it's way too much. If you want to play something like that, then just play Dragon Link, because this deck doesn't really do well with all those bricks in the deck. It's already a little bit bricky, so putting cards like Romulus, which you have to include then Divine Lance and Phalanx, makes the deck more bricky. So just summoning Heavenly Spheres going first, it's perfectly fine for a deck like this. It's good enough interruption. Speaking of Heavenly Spheres, just one off, which is something that I also don't run another dragon in the deck to be able to use its second effect, because again, it would be playing more bricks just to utilize an engine that you don't really commit to it. So you just need to play one. For the Nightmares, play one Cerberus, one Phoenix, and one Unicorn. Pretty standard. In a deck that has the extra deck space to play all three of them, I would recommend playing all three of them because there are center scenarios where each and every one of them can be useful. And for the Link Force, which you don't really summon too often because you don't spam a lot of monsters on the field, but they could come up in some scenarios, so I play one copy of Appaloosa because you can just have more negates on the field, and one Boral Sword in case you don't have access to too many monsters of BLS, then you can just use the Chaos Dragons and the Chaos Creators effect to get 4 monsters on the field, so you can just OTK your opponent with your Boral Sword. So yep, that's the deck, guys. I hope Konami releases more BLS support in the future. We've seen that decks of Yugi's monsters will get more support. Gaia just became a full-on archetype, and BLS has been out for quite some time, so it's been a long time since we got the support. So I hope Konami gives us more cards for this deck, because now that they don't rely on an anime to give us the core sets, they just give us support for pretty much anything that they come up with. So I'm pretty sure that anything that's related to Yugi will get more support eventually, so I hope the deck becomes much better eventually. So yep, if you enjoyed this video, guys, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future content, and we'll see you next time.